loud. Welcome everybody to our very first ever Tuesday night. Or was it not Tuesday? It's Wednesday night. Zoom for VA assumable loans in the National Capital Region. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up the live streaming to the group now, and just bear with me as I set that up here. It makes me nervous when I set this up every time. So, all right, going live. So we'll get to do the intro again.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so it tells you it's preparing, and then it's actually already live. So welcome everybody. And when you do live streaming, sometimes you just have to wait a few minutes while everyone is getting connected. And here's my big face, so I'm just going to minimize that screen. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Julie Shepard, and I am the original creator slash founder slash, we kind of make a joke, I'm the CEO of the group, and we have an amazing admin team, and I'm joined tonight by my co-admin Maria Melvin, and what we affectionately refer to as our COO. So she's going to be here helping monitor the chat in the Facebook group. And I want to introduce to you our fantastic realtor panel. So I'm really blessed to know all of these women. Some of you I've just met recently, and some of you I've known for years and years and years. So Karen Olmstead is joining us. She brought this idea to me and said, we really need to do this. We're seeing so many people who are moving into the area or living here who really want to purchase a home, and there's a lot of confusion and questions about VA assumable loans. And so we're just really lucky that we have these top-notch experts. So Karen is on with us, and I'll just go around the screen here as I have you guys. And Heidi Robbins, who's joining us. And both of these two lovely women have been GAMS members since the inception. Actually, they're founding members. Jennifer Hernandez is another fantastic realtor in the area who's been around doing this work with them for a while, and new to the team here, to the group, Stephanie Williams. So a little fun fact, I think this is kind of cute. She actually sold the house next door to me to a new military family that's moving in. So I was just so excited when I met them, because you just never know who you're going to get right in your neighborhood. So I was like, oh, Stephanie, that's so cool. So we hadn't met until we started doing this online. So I have given my fantastic intro now, so I'm going to stop talking, and Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you to get started.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for participating. We have been working on this for a couple weeks now. So just so you know, we actually have an outline of everything that we are going to go over, from basically our experiences of working assumable loans, as well as what the process is that's out there. So you're going to hear a lot of information, take some notes. And then also we have been in this outline trying to make sure that we answered the questions that you put out to us over the last couple weeks as well. And then at the end, we're going to open it up to more questions if we didn't answer them as well. So first of all, we're going to kick off is, what is an assumable loan? Basically what an assumable loan is when a willing home buyer, and I'm going to read a description of it. A willing home buyer takes over and becomes responsible for the existing loan of a willing home seller. So there are a couple forms. Actually, it can be VA or FHA, but tonight we're going to be talking only about VA, because you're all military. And that's probably what you want to do, is you want to assume a VA loan. There is who can qualify? That's a great question. And believe it or not, a non-veteran can actually qualify for that. But we really like to have veteran to veteran. What that is called is, it's called swapping. So basically, and we're going to get into some of the details of this, but basically what that is you're swapping your entitlement or they're swapping the entitlement is going to the other person. everybody has a choice in how they want to do this. We strongly suggest making sure that you talk to a real estate agent and explaining everything, because there are ins and outs of why you may not want to swap, or actually not swap. In this case, you would not give it to a non-veteran. And we'll go into some of those details with that. It When you don't give it to another non-veteran, basically your entitlement is actually still tied up. So we'll go into that a little bit more details, but that's basically what we're going to be talking about, and who is eligible for that. Heidi, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Super. Hi, everyone. Heidi Robbins. Going to answer a couple of questions. One was asked, what is the pro of assuming a VA loan if you're a buyer? So the number one pro in this market right now, when interest rates are probably in the mid sixes, I think right now, is that you can assume a loan that somebody maybe took with a much lower interest rate, 2s, 3s, maybe even 4%, and that makes a huge difference in what you're able to purchase. So that is one of the biggest advantages. Another one is lower closing costs, lower funding fee if it's applicable, if you do have to pay the funding fee. And also, you're assuming a loan that somebody has already paid a couple of years off in most cases. So you might just be inheriting a loan that already has 4, 5, 6, 7 years paid off on it. So that's also a huge benefit. The benefit for a seller is that you could get a higher sales price. It happens. I've had some listings where we've gotten multiple offers by multiple veterans or active duty people using their VA loan. And it escalates the price. So, I mean, that's a big plus for the sellers. Definitely do not see this as a negative, because there are definitely advantages out there for sellers if you have the time and the patience, which we'll go into later. But, I did some rough math today to kind of see with today's interest rates, if you stacked something that was an assumable interest rate against something that is today's interest rates, and at 6.5%, if you were to get an $800,000 loan, your payment would be $5,000. At a 2.75%, if you were to assume a 1.25, you'd have the exact same payment. So you can see where the advantages are in being able to afford a different home in a different category. So, we're all hoping for interest rates to go down, but that this is just one tool in our toolboxes that we have as VA realtors that know the VA loan process and also the assumptions. So I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie, and so she can go into some more detail about the process for the sellers.
Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. So I'm going to talk to you about how you get prepared to do an assumption, because there are some things that people don't quite understand. The first of which is the servicer. Who is a servicer? A servicer is who you pay your mortgage to. So if you as a seller are considering allowing an assumption to take place, you need to figure out who your servicer is. Some popular servicers, PennyMac, Loan Depot, even some smaller banks like Truist could be a servicer, but really that person is the one that services your loan. It's the person that, or not the person, but it's the company that you pay your mortgage to. So you are going to get in touch with them and you're going to say, hey, I'm considering selling my property as an assumable loan. What exactly is the process for doing that? Some examples would be, is an assumption packet required? Are there third-party authorization forms required? Do you need me to provide contact information for a potential buyer before you'll even talk to me about doing an assumable? You're going to ask for, like, who exactly am I going to be engaging with if I do this assumable loan? Do you have a dedicated team? What's the timeline? This is a big one because a lot of people are hesitant to do assumable loans because, they hear it could take a really long time. Something we wanted to bring up on this webinar is that there's actually a circular that was recently published by the VA It is, I believe, going to be in the chat, so you can reference it, and we'll also post it to the group. But it's a circular that actually establishes some guidelines by the VA for processing timelines by servicers. When you read the circular, it's going to talk about 45 days. That's a magical number. And the circular is going to reference if somebody has direct authority or not. And I think something for you guys to understand about that is whether or not the loan can be underwritten and actually fully processed from within the capacity of the servicer, or if it has to go to the VA to be underwritten. The key there for you guys is if it has to get sent to the VA, it's going to take a little bit longer. But all of these things, all these questions are things that you should be asking of the person or the people at the company that you pay your mortgage to. Another thing I'm going to talk about here is as a buyer. So everybody wants to know, how do you find assumable loans? Where are they? Why can't I find them? I know we talk about it a lot in GAMS, which is great because they're definitely, it is the target for assumables is our community, which I'm very thankful for, but there's other ways to find assumable loans. I think what I'd really like to say here is there are some scams out there in the market that try to get your attention and say that if you pay for a service, they'll help you find an assumable loan, or they're the gatekeepers of assumables. That is not correct. Everyone can find assumable loans with free, publicly available information. It is not as challenging as one would assume. And I would just like to say that you should consult a real estate agent to get access to that inventory. And I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Stephanie, as I'm having mouse problems there. Well, I get to talk about the fun part of the VA assumable loan is what do you need to qualify and how do you qualify for this? Because there's a lot of misconceptions out there about that. A lot of people, a lot of veterans, military think that you have to be pre-approved before starting the process. But in our market, it might be a wise choice to be pre-approved, especially how Heidi and Stephanie talked about. There are competitive assumable loans out there. And once you are pre-approved from a different lender that's vetted you, that seller knows that you're strong to maybe start the process. And so some of the basics, if you have not been pre-qualified yet or pre-approved, is that you need to have like a 12-month history of mortgage payments and rental payments. You have to have some sort of a history to show that. You also have to agree to assume all the liabilities associated with the loan, which a lot of people may not realize. And you also have to have some sort of a residual income showing that you can repay the loan. And then you also, another fee that a lot of people don't realize that you have is that you have to pay 5% of the loan balance as the funding fee. And if you do have a disability rating, that can be waived, and the lenders can talk to you about that. And then you also have to satisfy your credit and your income requirements with the servicer. And I'm going to talk about the servicers in just a second. And then the other big item to qualify for a VA assumable loan is your debt to income ratio. Most servicers have out there 41% as your debt to income ratio, but some, because not all servicers are the same, that might change a little bit. So it could be different with every servicer out there. And then also just with any loan process that you're going through, you're going to need your bank statements, your work related statements, and also your investments and proof of income and your taxes. So those are kind of just the basics, how you qualify, and an agent can help you figure that out also. So the big thing is, are the servicers. And this is what can delay or make an assumable loan go very quickly, is that servicers are not the same. No two VA assumable loans will be the same. And the reason is for example, you have credit unions and you have banks, and a lot of these financial institutions actually hold the VA loan when it was originally set. And since they hold that loan, they already have the staff and the ability to go ahead and do the assumable process. Then you also have mortgage brokers out there. And a lot of the mortgage brokers do not have the staff capable to do these assumable loans and hopefully meet that 45-day deadline. So depending again who that servicer is or who that bank or credit union is can determine how quick that loan will close. And those are all important questions to ask if you're thinking about going into doing an assumable loan, is to find out first who that servicer is so that your agent or can help you do with this process. And then the other thing is, if anyone knows what the COE is, your certificate of eligibility. This is something that you should do before you even start this process. And I'm going to tell you, the VA.gov has really updated their site, I think, since the beginning of this year, where you can actually go on and pull it yourself when you sign in into the site, and you can actually pull your own COE and understand exactly if you have entitlement or if you don't have any entitlement. And then, you know, when you're going into a contract on a VA assumable, you know exactly what you have. And two things with that, with your certificate of eligibility that you need to keep in mind is that if you have full entitlement, which is very important, and because if you have full entitlement, you do not have a loan limit. So that is really nice, but you still have to pay the delta of the actual sales price, listing price of the VA assumable to what the balance is on the VA loan. But here in Fairfax County, we're very blessed to have a high amount, when you don't have entitlement. So ways to not have any entitlement on your VA loan is if you've never used it before, you've never purchased a home, you've had a previous VA loan, but you've restored it. And that can even be what I've seen this last year with one of my clients, even somebody that had a short sale back in 2009, they had their full eligibility back because everything was paid off. So even if you've had something go on like that, a short sale, you can still have your full eligibility, but you just, again, pull your COE so you can see what that is. And then the other great thing about living in, I'm going to use Fairfax County as an example, is that if you do not have full entitlement, we have a higher loan limit, I feel like, than the rest of the country at 1,149,000, I think 985. And so that means that, say, for example, you had a rental home, you had your home in California, your piece is moving here, you decided to keep it, and you found a home, you know, you would have about $849,000 on your VA loan that you could play with. So those are really good things to keep in mind. You just don't want to assume I have 100% eligibility to do the assumption, because the other problem is a lot of people will go into this and not realize that they don't have full eligibility. And then they have to pay the delta of where the listing price is or the sales price to the loan balance. And then at the last minute, you know, midnight, 12:01, oh my gosh, we don't have the full eligibility. I have to come up with another $100,000. So this is very, very important that you understand what your eligibility is, what that amount is, and how to most move forward. And that will actually save a lot of problems. Those are where a lot of problems happen and delay a lot of the processing. And so so again, most important, just pull that COE. I can't tell you, that just really saves a lot in this process when you understand that. And any agent that you're working with can help you understand that too. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Heidi.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm going to talk about real quick the process to sell an assumable loan. So if you're the seller, you're going to do what you would normally do when you go to list your house for sale. You're going to get it prepared, get it ready, get it staged, professional photography, staging, all the things. And then when your agent enters it into the MLS, they're going to write that in the comments. They're going to also put that in there that it could be an assumable loan. And so it's much like a regular sale. There's nothing really different that you need to do. Same amount of marketing. Get the word out there, because the best way to get the best dollar for your home is to do all the marketing. So, you know, you just want to make sure that you're working with somebody that also understands it. If you're a seller and an agent tries to talk you out of doing the assumption, people fear what they don't know. And so there's a good chance that that person might not also understand the assumable loan. So it really is a great benefit. And I think there are advantages, and sellers should definitely explore that. Also, if you know, Stephanie had mentioned, and so did Jennifer, about being prepared when you are selling your home. Have all of the data on your assumption and share that in the listing for your home, so people know what is that loan balance, because they're going to have to, decide, is this a house that I can go look at? Or do I not have the cash or other options to cover that delta? So you're going to need to have all of that information ready to go when you list your home, and your agent can walk you through what's needed. And we've discussed some of that today as well. So that's just a couple of the data points that you're going to need. And I just want to say, don't rule them out. Don't rule out those VA assumptions if you are a seller, because they really can be a great option for everybody. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to Karen, who will discuss preparing your buyers.
So I'm going to add a little humor to this, because there seems to be two themes that are going on. One is make sure you get an agent and be prepared. I'm a safety girl with Julia Roberts. I'm a safety girl. I just happened to see that movie the other day, so that's making me laugh. But you need to be prepared. One thing for talking about buyers being prepared is that you need to be prepared with, like we talked about earlier, is getting that pre-approval from a different lender. When you go into this, what if the assumable falls apart? Are you going to want to walk away from this house, or are you prepared to turn it over to a conventional loan, or are you prepared to turn it over to be a VA straight line? That's what we're going to call that, instead of an assumable. So you need to have backup plans, and that's where you're going to work with your agent to have that. You also want to, if you are working with another lender, keep them abreast of what's going on. And your good lenders won't walk away from you, even though you're doing an assumable, because you can't use them. We'll get into the other possibilities in a second with that. But the good ones are actually going to stick with you, because they really want to make sure that it's going to closing, that you're getting this house and that it's moving forward. But if it falls apart, you want to make sure you have that backup plan. What you want to do is, with any normal contract, you're going to write a contract. And again, I know we're going to say this probably a couple more times, because we're trying to protect you. We're trying to protect you. So you really want to have a contract. The contracts are vetted through our NVAR and our VAR, which are associations that we are part of. In those contracts are the addendums, as we call the guts of the contract. So we want to make sure that you're protected with that. So you write a normal contract, and then there's parts in there where you check that it's an assumable instead of a normal one. And then you work through that process with that. One thing that is big conversation on the GAMS page and all over all the other pages is pricing. How do you price it? So we're going to break it down and give you an example of what the pricing is and how that comes up. There's always going to be a little wiggle room, and we're sorry that we're using a high price, but this is the one that I came up with, because it's, 400, 600, whatever they are. I'm going to use the price point of a $700,000 loan balance. Okay, get your pens and papers out so you have this down. You have a $700,000 loan price, but the agent and the sellers are listing it at $850,000. Okay, that's kind of normal, what you're going around here with some of the markets that you have. So it's going to be an $850,000 listing price. And I'm just going to be honest with you. Some people are going to say, how can they sell that at $850,000? Just last year it did this. It's the going market in certain neighborhoods. So there's going to be certain neighborhoods that are definitely going to be higher than other ones. And we don't go on square footage around here. I mean, I don't know if the other agents want to shake their heads. It's usually really on market of the neighborhoods. Okay. One street may be different than another street. So, and it's different than Texas, and it's different than Florida. So you just have to understand that how our market rates, or how our market is. So again, you have a 700 loan balance, you have an 850 listing price. And let's say we all know that there's escalations around here and people are paying more for the house, like Heidi had mentioned earlier. You actually get an accepted offer of $900,000. So you're paying 50 over of what the listing price was. So what that gap is going to be is $200,000. So that $200,000 is what you're going to have to come up with. However, you also have your closing costs and your funding fee. In a normal VA, the funding fee can be rolled into the loan. In this case, you can't do that. The funding fee is on top of that. Now, on the good side, though, is your funding fee is actually lower in a normal one. And we'll actually break that down a little bit more of what the funding fee is. So you need to be able to qualify for 900,000. So remember we talked about the COE. So there's the difference there. So if you own a house in a different part of the country, luckily coming to Northern Virginia, you probably will have enough there to do that. So you need to be able to make sure that that COE is very critical in knowing that. So you need to be able to qualify for that $900,000. Not what the loan balance is what the 900 is what you are actually, the accepted offer is. There are a couple different ways that you can come up with the 200,000 and you can pay for this. You can do cash. You can come up with seconds. There are some ins and outs of coming up with seconds. One, there's not a lot of lenders that will do seconds. Two, there is the seconds are actually much higher interest rates. So working with somebody to help you figure out, because let's say you have a $3,500 mortgage, which is what the current seller is paying, but then you have a second. And that's also, then that's going to be another $800 on top of that. So those are some things that you need to think about before you go into that. And also, there is the other option, which is not common out there because of course the seller wants to get their money, is seller financing. So there are some people that will do that, but that is an option as well. We all know that of course cash is king and a lot of people want to do the cash, but there are other options out there. And that's something again that you always want to make sure that you know, and you're prepared for the different things that you have, the different scenarios. So with that, once you get an offer, which we all hope we all, that's our main goal, is you get an accepted offer. And Stephanie's going to step in and talk about that.
Yes. So I think just to kind of bridge that, what Karen was talking about with seconds and seller financing, etc., there's a caveat to all of that. It's servicer dependent, and the servicers have different interpretations of what's acceptable and what's not. So what you think you might be able to do with one does not mean you're going to be able to do it with another. All of those things considered. So let's say you find the house, you can cover the gap, you're prepared. You have mentally been like, I know this might not be amazing, but I'm going to do it. And then the offer is accepted and everybody's really happy and they're ready to roll. What happens next? So seller, first thing seller needs to do is call the servicer and kind of like what I was talking about before. Hey, I'm going to do an assumption. What do I need to do? And that very well could be giving them the buyer's information, giving them a copy of the ratified contract, which is important. Also providing information for the title company as to who is actually going to be that middle ground, who's talking between the two and the actual servicer. You're going to find out what exactly needs to happen, and you need to do it fast. Time matters with an assumption. I think there's a certain type of seller and a certain type of buyer to do these and do them well. And it's ones that are very diligent with their communication, with their follow-up, and who are also very much on top of their things. You cannot not return a phone call. You cannot ignore emails. You have to know what is expected and you need to do it in a timely manner. The other piece is, I talked about this earlier, there's a third-party authorization form. Sometimes you want to make sure that the servicer can also talk to your agent, because if you want your agent to call and bang down the doors to try and get this thing to closing, you need to make sure they have permission to do it. Then after, typically there's an assumption packet. The assumption packet sometimes is mailed. And then it's mailed to the buyer or it's mailed to the seller. They need to be on the lookout for that in the mail. And then they need to make sure they get it to the other party. Sometimes you have to sign it in wet ink, which is a little asinine, but is required. Sometimes you can sign it and then scan it, but it depends on the servicer as to what is required. You just need to make sure that you're doing it quickly. So some tips to make sure that everybody is getting to settlement. You need to have patience and you need to have good communication. I did an Assumable with Heidi And I think very early on in the beginning, she was like, you know, these are my favorite kinds of transactions. And it's because we're all working as a team. We all have the same goal. I think if you want something fast, cheap, and easy, there are other options. But assumables are very much working together towards a common goal that benefits both parties. And so you need to be able to, if there's going to be a hiccup, you need to be able to pick up the phone and talk to the other party, whether it's going to be the agents talking to the seller or the buyer, but you need to make sure that you have open lines of communication to make sure that everybody's going towards the finish line. Have patience. And also, I think now is a little timely. There's a lot of bad juju as it relates to assumptions. There's horror stories. Y'all, it's not that bad. I think it's important to like under promise, over deliver in these scenarios. But if everybody's working together and you do your homework up front and make sure that you're doing it the right way, like they will close. It's not like 1 in 20 closes. Like they will get there. You just need to make sure you pack your patience and make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. I will pass it back to Karen to talk about some other parts of the contract and fees to pay attention
So
to.
thanks, Stephanie. So another theme that you've probably heard is the servicer. What we have all found and we are hearing, seeing, and stuff like that is that the servicers are not consistent. You know, and we see that in a regular process. Servicers have their own processes. What we think is that the servicers are, well, one, they're not making money in this, so they're not really getting anything. Okay, so let's just talk that straight. They would love to have a 6-7% because they're going to make more money off of it. But this is a benefit to FHA and to VA, and we're going to do it. So they need to follow and follow along with it. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to make things more difficult. We have all seen that sometimes they don't know the VA guidelines. I actually had one where they didn't know what the disability was, and my client had disability, and they didn't factor the disability in. And then they also told me that they couldn't do, they didn't have enough eligibility. So you just need to, again, make sure you have a real estate agent to help you through this process. But you need to know that is something that we struggle with, but we work through it. And again, like Stephanie has said, and we've all said, is that the goal is to get you to closing, and we're going to help you work through that. The other thing that we haven't really touched on a lot, we mentioned a little bit, is this is not a 30-day. There are a few that have closed in 30 days. What we're seeing on average is 60 to 100 and was it 190 or 120 days, 120, and the average is really 90 is really what we're looking at. Because if you think about what Stephanie had said too earlier, going back to the circular, is once that they approve you, then they have the 45 days. So there's a lot that goes in that, but just understand patience. Okay, so on to my part. What I was supposed to talk about is the other parts of the contract that are important is that there are no appraisals in this. I'm going to go back to that because there's some pros and cons in the big wide industry with that one is there's no inspections. You do not have to have an inspection. So we hate that our clients have to have no inspections in a regular process in this crazy market that we live. But if you want to have a strong offer, that is something that some people put out there. So, you know, and there's different ways that you can do inspections, but that's something that you can talk about with your agent, but you don't have to for an appraisal have that because you're assuming you're taking over the loan. So that also means that there's no WDI, which is a,
termite inspection.
Yes, the termite instruction it's wood destroying insects. So that could be carpenter bees, and carpenter bees sometimes are worse than those damn little termites. And termites are gross, just so you know. And the funding fee. Okay, so this is how we were gonna loop back with the funding fee. How did I get all the numbers? Okay, the funding fee is it's lower again, so it's 0.5% versus 1.5%. For first-time home buyers. So again, it's lower. If you were to do a normal straight, your funding fee would be 1.5%. This is a 0.5%. Now, for second time or multiple buyers, it goes up to 3.3. And then again, if you have a disability, and not everybody knows that, but for disability, it's 10% or higher, your funding fee is waived. So that is when you pull your eligibility, it actually states on there that you're eligible, that you have your disability is on there, and they'll usually give your rating on there. Okay, another one that we want to talk about is a lot of people are, doing this early. So basically they may not be here for a little later. So they're setting up post-settlement occupancies. There have been a few on this panel. I haven't done one yet, but there's been a few that have done the pre-settlement occupancy, because it's actually taking so much longer, is that they're allowing somebody to come in before settlement, and that's called a pre-settlement. But there's also post-settlement occupancy. Some of the lenders will tell you that it has to be 60 days on the dot. The VA guideline says it's intent to. So some of you may have orders that are 5 months out, but you may be closing at 4 months. So which would be that 60 days, but that wasn't really the best example. But basically, you can go beyond that 60 days, but some of them will say no. So you need to go back to the VA guidelines, and your agent can help you with that as well. The other thing that is also a bonus with doing some of this is some of your title fees, as Heidi was mentioning earlier, some of the lower fees, some of your title fees may be a little bit lower, as well as lender fees. The lender can actually, I think it's only charge you $300. So the lender fee is actually, which is the new servicer, they can actually charge you, they can charge you less for that. Okay, the other one is there's always some extra addendums that you can throw in there for whatever reason. Another thing that we also wanted to talk about, and I think this was in a question earlier, is that if you're, and I'm going to use the $3,500 mortgage payment, that includes your taxes and escrows, so, and insurance. So one thing you need to realize is that you can't take over somebody else's insurance, because maybe you're not that person. The insurance company vets you. They want to see if you're a good insurable person. So you need to still find your own insurance. And if they bought it 10 years ago, their insurance may be lower. We all know that insurance prices have gone up just like everything else in the world today. So you need to go get your own insurance. That may change your mortgage payment from what you're assuming. And you need to make sure that the lender knows this and you work through that, because they then can throw a little monkey wrench into it with that as well. So you do need to go get your own insurance. As soon as you ratify the contract and you send that off, that's something that you need to start processing like a normal one, like a normal, any contract that you do, you need to start getting the insurance right away. Okay, so then I'm actually I was gonna throw this back, but basically when you did all that, hopefully you'll get to the loan approval process, and then title work you should work very closely with your title company. Again, it's a team. Like Stephanie said, Jennifer, we've all said you need to build a team, and you have that team and you constant communication. So you're going to keep the title company involved as well. And sometimes that title company can be the person also that's pinging the lender to keep things moving along as well. So you want to make sure that they're in that as well. Okay, so I'm going to hand it back to Jennifer, and she's going to go into now that we are going to the closing.
Thank you, Karen. I have to follow that. You're wonderful. I'm going to be like a Karen, but a good Karen. So a lot of veterans and military that have an assumable loan and they're closing, they're like, well, when's my payment going to be due? That's like your biggest question. And something to know, you're actually assuming a loan. It's not really a new loan. You're assuming somebody's loan from a current servicer. So for example, if you close April 30th, your payment is going to be due May 1st. So in the planning process, that's something where you maybe want to set your closing time sometime mid-month, working with the servicer, working with the title company to see what you can do. Because if you haven't budgeted for that extra payment after your closing cost, you want to make sure that you can go ahead and pay that on the 1st. So that's something to keep in mind, that you realize that that payment is due that very next month on the 1st, and you don't have like a 30-day lag time. Sometimes where you do in a normal process where you would close in the middle month and have like 45 days to pay. So that's something to keep in mind. And once you close the VA loan, the assumable packet, it does need to be sent back. And this is something the seller and if the seller has an agent or if it's a for sale by owner, you've really got to track this and make sure that it's received. The servicer, you have to, it's teamwork with your agent, with the servicer, with everybody involved, the title company, everybody, that that packet has been sent back and that you're tracking that it was received. Because the problem that you come with that is sometimes somebody wants to, you're leaving here, you sold your home. Again, you're going to California to purchase and your entitlement hasn't been restored. Your entitlement will not be fully restored until the VA has fully approved the loan. And again, sometimes, you know, things can get lost, things cannot be sent. Different servicers have different processes. Some are very quick, and you know, this will close quickly, like 2 days, 3 days, VA's approved it, but then some can take 30 or more. So you just need to stay on top of that servicer and making sure that they have actually sent that paperwork. I know that sounds like a lot of work, but again, any of these fantastic agents on here know that it's daily phone calls and following up with servicers just to make sure something got done, because so many of these servicers have not done a lot of these and they don't have a formula or a plan to follow with their employees when they do this. You might have Johnny who just started 2 weeks ago and is now handling this whole process for this company, and he may not understand that. So you've got to make sure that you stay on top of whoever you're working with on that. And then again, Karen talked about post-settlement occupancy, which you just need to follow our guidelines and our post-settlement occupancy addendums that are again by our in VAR here that establish timelines. Example, when you would vacate the property, when the seller would vacate, and when you'd move in, and if something happens and you have to extend, there's always addendums that can be done. So that's all I have. And back to Heidi to talk about some great resources.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Julie, I think we have a slide that we're going to share with everybody. So I just put together these links for you all. I think the Veterans Benefit Administration is probably the best way to get your information because it's directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak. There are a whole lot, and I took a trip down google.com looking for all the information I could find on assumptions, and there is so much information out there, but what I found is that most of them are lead generations for mortgage companies. So you don't want to just go searching randomly, I don't think, to get the exact answers that you need. You want to either talk to a trusted advisor, your realtor, go to the VA Benefits Administration website. And so particularly, I pulled out these, we've talked about the circulars, and I think Karen might have referenced it as well. People are asking, you know, what is this circular? In December of last year, the VA put out sort of a guideline of non-compliance that a lot of lenders are not being super cooperative because, as we've said, and a couple of different people have said, they don't make any money off of this. So there's no skin in the game really for them. So they're not being rewarded to work hard or fast. So the VA pretty much, you know, put out some rules and some guidance in there. So that's a really great one that y'all are going to want to read up on just so you kind of know what's going on. And then last year in May, they also put out another one talking about assumptions because obviously the interest rates had gotten really high and assumptions all of a sudden became popular. I mean, we weren't talking about assumptions 5 years ago. Why would you? We had 2.5%, 3.5% interest rates. But now it's a hot topic. So, and then the VA Buyer's Guide, specifically page 20 of that talks just a little bit about assumptions. But again, there's just a lot of information out there. So, and a lot of it's redundant and it's not really it wasn't super informative. It was like, click here, put in your email address. And then I sort of went down a couple rabbit holes like that. And it was just lenders looking for lead generation. So just be leery of that and just be cognizant of it. So, you know, really look for your, where you're getting all of your information from. Because I do think that this particular topic is a hot button right now. And so you're getting a lot of people that, you know, want to grab that business. So, and with that, I think we are going to turn it over to some questions from the group. Julie?
Yes, we are ready for questions. So here I'm going to pin myself so I can join the fun in the panel here. We had one question, and I'm not sure that we answered this earlier. What happens if you don't have the full entitlement? But before you answer, I want everyone else that's on, go ahead. If you're on the Zoom and you're thinking of a question, go ahead and type it in now, so that way we get it queued up and ready to go if you have anything we haven't answered yet. So the question was, what happens if you don't have the full entitlement? Okay, don't all answer at once.
I think there's some differing opinions about the response, which is perhaps the hesitation, because there are some people that think that if you do not have enough remaining entitlement for the remaining loan balance, that you cannot proceed. However, there may be some of us that were successfully able to pass one through when they didn't have enough remaining entitlement. So that's a non-answer to that response.
So so I'm going to tag along with Stephanie on that. Agree, because we're kind of like, oh, do we want to answer that? Basically, it comes back to the servicers, and what we find is so remember, some of the services that you're dealing with are people that are pushing paper through, and they're not really loan officers. Your loan officers that you're during a regular transaction, you know, hopefully know the VA guidelines and know how to do things and stuff like that. So what we find is there's people that don't, like I talked about the disability earlier, is that they're going to say, nope, you don't do it. And, you know, to be honest with you, you really could have your dual. So you could have a husband, you could have two people that could use both of their entitlements. So, they should be able to, but you may, like Stephanie has said, you may have to push. And then I will tell you that that's something where you and your representatives need to discuss is how hard do you want to push, because it may lengthen your time. So constant communication and stuff like that, but it can get done, and they should allow it.
Thank you.
And
Anybody
you
else?
so what you do is, sorry, I guess we need to answer it too, is you have to basically have the cash to make up that difference.
Okay, so we're happy with that. Okay, so next question. Under the COE, there is an amount of VA entitlement charged to the previous loan. How do we use this number along with the local VA loan limit to calculate how much you have?
There is a calculator online that will actually tell you how much entitlement you have back, like you have in our market. There is kind of a back of the hand way to calculate it as well, if anybody else wants to chime in on that. But we can put the what's my payment link into the chat box maybe to answer that. I'll see if I can pull it up.
That would be perfect. Thank you. So I think this has been fantastic. Yep, she said the link would be great. Okay. Anna asks, can you talk more about seller financing?
Well, well, if you can find a seller that is willing to finance, you know, on either an assumption or a convention, you know, instead of a conventional, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like a lot of sellers are selling so they can get their equity and turn around and use it to purchase another property. So, so it's an option. I've not run into that. I don't know if any of the other agents on this call have run in on sellers saying, you have, Stephanie?
Yeah, I had a seller that was open to doing seller financing. The servicer said no.
And so what everybody understands is, so basically our rates are 6.5%, 7%. They may say, I'll give it to you for 5%. And they may put their own terms there. So it's kind of like they're your bank per se for a certain period of time. So there's some, you know, definitely you're putting yourself out there for some things. It's just, you got to know what you're doing when you do that.
I agree. Yeah, the seller has to do a lot of legwork, I think, on that. I think you have to get people involved writing those contracts too, because you're going to be signing a contract with a seller for that financing, because the seller's not a bank, but they're doing a bank's, you know, transaction with you.
Thank you for that fantastic answer. I am so glad that I'm not the one having to buy a house this year. I bought in 2019 and we rented it out, and now we're back in it. So I'm holding on that. So next question. Is it possible for me to use my VA benefit as a disabled veteran, but no personal income, while my husband has a VA mortgage on another property as an active duty member, qualifying jointly, but using my benefits?
Consult a
Yes.
lender.
Yeah, yes, you should be able to. You have to basically you have to fall within the debt to income. But you should be able to, if you have that disabled veteran, so you should have those benefits coming in. It's all about, do the numbers work out? And if you're qualifying jointly, but using your benefits, yes, because yes, you just have to make sure you have your stuff, and you should be able to do that. Does everyone else agree with that?
Yes.
It's all about qualifying, I think.
Yes, it's all about qualifying. And I will tell you, have your stuff beforehand, so you have all the documents. Like, have it ready for when they ask you something, you give it to them. When they ask you something, you give it to them.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers the question. All right, next question. I love it. Now the juices are flowing. People are starting to ask their
Actually,
questions.
can I add one more thing to that? So
yeah, of course.
So because I reread it. So make sure that you have the lease for the other property, and make sure you know what the rental income is for that other property. And I'm assuming that it's rented.
Those are definitely good tips. Okay, so if we might be willing to sell our home as an assumable, but would then hope to buy another home with an assumable loan, we're looking at needing a good break between one and the other, and knowing we need patience, knowing the timing is unknown. So I'm not really sure that's a question. It's more of like a statement with looking for confirmation.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
I would agree. I wonder if maybe they're asking, because they might need their eligibility to buy the next assumable on that question.
Maybe that's what the question.
Kind of missing that word eligibility. If they're willing to sell, yes, it's about eligibility. She just wrote. How I read that. So again, it depends how much eligibility you would have left from your current going into your next to see if that financially works for you. And that's another good time where you would maybe want to talk with the lender to see where you are financially, to see if that would work without that full eligibility being released. Because going into, in our market, that would almost be a contingent contract if you were closing on an assumable somewhere else and not having that definite close date, maybe because of that lag time, you would maybe not be able to close on a new one as quick. So you almost want to release your full assumable loan that you're selling before you would purchase, because it would create less pain, I think, and make it work out. And then you would have your full eligibility back. If that makes sense.
The original, the new servicer, for the new assumable, they may be asking more information about, because it's not a sold house yet. They may be saying, well, you have that, and adding that into your debt.
Correct.
So that's a big thing is they'll be like, so what, you have, you have this, it's not a sold house yet. So that would be something that they would look at.
And then in the past, if the house is not sold, they won't start your process yet, which adds a ton of time to your timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think you guys are all in agreement with that one. Jessica has a question. Jessica wants to know, wants you to elaborate on the pros and cons of an assumable loan between a non-veteran buyer and a VA seller.
A non-veteran buyer and VA seller. Okay.
So if I'm assuming, like, okay, let's say I was going to sell my house here and we have a VA loan and I wanted to offer it as an assumable, but the buyer was not going to take they're not eligible. So we don't.
So then your entitlement gets locked up.
So
yeah. That person either sells it, or I don't know why they would refi, because if you're, the assumption is that you are assuming because the interest rate is so low.
It
So it's a
opens
pretty
up,
big con and not a
it
big
leaves,
pro.
it leaves a lot for the seller. Basically, you're left hanging there. What if they go into default? What if they go into a short sale? And then you're basically SOL on that until it actually is closed out. And if it goes to a short sale or a foreclosure, that's held on you. That actually follows you. So, you know, there are certain circumstances where I've seen people who've said, I'm never going to use my eligibility again. And they're like, I don't care, you know, for whatever reason that may be. And in that case, okay, I get it. You know, it may be somebody that's older, or somebody's like, I'm maxed out. I'm not going to be buying a house anymore. And they do that. But it just puts you into a little bit of a circumstance that you may not want to go down that path.
Yeah. My dad actually allowed someone to assume his VA loan a long time ago, and then he couldn't actually use his entitlement until the loan was paid off 30 years later. And it's something he didn't really consider at that point in time, but later on was like, I really wish I had thought about my options for this. And something to add to that, as a buyer, I mean, if you can get someone to let you take their entitlement, that's awesome, because you can, if you're not doing substitution of eligibility, or we're talking about swapping, you don't have to occupy it as a primary residence. You could actually turn it into an investment property, which is something people don't think about a lot. So, I mean, you could feasibly, I mean, if you're open to taking that on, you could feasibly jack that price up and then see what happens. But there are risks associated with it.
Well, she said thank you. So great. So we have just a few minutes left here, and I want to take a personal privilege, and I want to ask you guys if you all want to share your favorite story, like 30 seconds each. What's your favorite story from doing your job here in the area? It doesn't have to be an assumable. Like, what do you like? What is it that keeps you going?
Oh, I'll talk. What keeps me going is just being able to help all these military families. That's my whole mission, my whole goal, why I got into this 12 years ago. When somebody went and helped us purchase a home moving to Virginia, and we ended up renting, and it's now our forever rental home. That's why I became an agent. And so the best thing I love is just helping families find their home and achieve their goals in this area, because it can be rough. And so I just love being out there and helping them with that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Stephanie?
Yeah. When we PCS back here, I mean, I'm from the area originally, but coming back here as a spouse with kids, it was extremely overwhelming and frightening. And the dollar amounts were just absolutely crazy. And I felt lost. And being able to come into it on the end of being an agent and helping ease that process, people sometimes are like, wow, that was actually a lot easier than I thought. And then you build relationships, and I don't know, it's just seeing it full circle is so fulfilling. It's a lot better than it was. It's good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Karen or Heidi?
I'll go. So I have actually kind of similar to Jennifer, except I had a horrific experience on my first home buying, and I was not a real estate agent. And I said I never wanted anybody. And we used my husband VA, and who we were working with, they just made us go through so many things that nobody should ever have to go through. And it was just because they weren't educated, and it was just horrific. And I said, I never want anybody to go through that process that we did. So that's why I got into it. I love it. I love helping people. I used to work for the Red Cross, and I was like, oh, guess I'm helping people buy houses now. But, you know, like Stephanie said, and Jennifer, we become family. And I always joke with my clients, I said, I'm with you until you kick me to the curb. But I just love helping people move here, because I call it a beast, and it's just so difficult, and it's so challenging from renting, selling, and buying. It's just very difficult. And it helps me gives me satisfaction knowing that I can help somebody find a home that's the right fit for their family.
Thank you. All right, Heidi, you get to go last.
So we're 4 for 4, right? Everybody just wants to help everybody, which I think is amazing. The 2 times we PCS'd here, we were coming from Germany, both times. And it was a feat. And, you know, people always say Oconus moves are hard. I found that moving to DC was harder than any other PCS we had had. So yeah, so that's why I got into the business, similar to the stories that you've heard from Jennifer, Karen, and Stephanie, is that, you know, you hit here, boots on the ground, you might have to find a house in 48 hours. It's stressful. You might not know anybody. You might have to rent sight unseen. People are buying sight unseen. Like, I want to be that trusted resource for other military families, just to kind of take that piece off of their plate, because it's super stressful, as we all know and we've all talked about. So yeah, so I love to help, just like my counterparts here have all said, like, it's super rewarding to help your military family.
Thank you all so much for your time this evening and for working with me and our team to put this together, to bring it to the group. And I think that this really helps kind of debunk some of the mystique around it, and puts like a human face to some of the members of our group, to some of our longtime trusted realtors in GAMS. And I don't know if some of you saw the post that I put out last night. This is PCS planning season, right? This isn't when everyone's moving, but this is when everyone is doing their homework. And our group, every year we add more people, right? And so it gets more overwhelming and more anxiety producing. So we talked amongst our team and we're like, well, let's reshare some of these resources. 2 years ago, we did a video on best practices on rentals in the area. We talked about we're going to start telling our members, if you want to buy a house, don't use GAMS to buy a house. Go get a realtor. That's what they're paid to do. So interview whoever you want to interview. It doesn't have to be a GAMS realtor. We would love to have it be one of our fantastic, any of the members in the group. We've got hundreds of realtors that are active in the area. So we just wanted to share this with everybody, and hopefully everyone has found this really helpful. And it's live streamed, so it's going to be saved in the group. So you can go back and watch it again, and hopefully, till next time. So Maria, do you want to say any parting words?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I'm not in the market right now, but it never hurts to know what's going on, know your rights and your responsibilities and how the process works. So thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you,
All right.
everybody. Thanks, the panel.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Everybody.
Bye.